everyone. My name is Evie Lupine, and today we are having yet another interview. And this time we are talking to a familiar face. You guys probably already know who she is, but today we're talking to Daddy On Lee, who I was introduced to because I reacted slash watched the Anthony Padilla interview that you were a part of, and I was instantly like, I love this person. You were my favorite out of everyone on the show that was like new to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, so amazing. I love your style as a dom, and like your approach to everything seems really unique. So I'm so excited we could have this conversation today. But for people who don't know who you are already, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, hi. I'm Daddy Only. I am a dominatrix, a pro dom in LA. I've been a pro dom since 2013, so hitting 9 years now. And let's see, I don't know, how do I introduce myself? I never know how to introduce myself. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so let me just throw some ideas out there. So, how did you get started doing pro dom work, and were you doing BDSM before that, or did you kind of discover it while getting into working as a pro dom?
So I was always very kinky. I think we all a lot of people have those friends growing up where one person seems to talk about sex more than anything else.
Yeah.
And I kind of grew of age in like the time of all what's the phrase for it? Like the shock porn, like Goatsy and like
Oh,
Pop
yeah.
Girl and stuff like that. So that
Mm,
was that was very formative in my very like young adult like prepubescent to pubescent years. All those
mm,
things kind of started popping up in my life, and so I was just always super fascinated with sex. I knew I was kinky pretty much the moment my sexuality, like I had an inkling that I had a sexuality. Um, but I didn't really know what that was. I
mm.
initially thought it was submissive because it's just mostly what you see. So I'm like, oh, this looks hot. Like maybe I'm submissive. But then I tried it numerous times for like all through, my first experiences with sexuality throughout college. And it never really felt right to me, and
Mm.
so something never really quite clicked there. And so prior to this, I was a web developer, and I was kind of unhappily a web developer, but it paid the bills, and it had a
Mm.
lot of income growth. So I was just kind of like sticking to it because I just didn't really know what to do. And one of my best friends, one day she was like, "Hey, one of my friends is looking for a dominatrix. It's a paid gig. You should do it." And I didn't really give it a second thought. I talked to the person. The entire way that that was set up was very, very unconventional.
Yeah.
I'm not going to really go into the details of it, but it
Mm.
involved an assistant looking for a dominatrix for their boss. Very unconventional.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, via Facebook. It was very unconventional.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I talked to the person in question, and I immediately, upon talking to them, I knew I was down, but I just didn't really know how I would go about it in good conscience. Like stuff from
Mm.
even while I was talking to the client, like, am I in Dawn voice when I talk to them?
Mm.
How much do I get paid? Is this fair value? Like, how does this work? I just didn't even know anything from the very onset. So I already had a fet life then. Talked to one of my friends, a lot of friends in the goth community, and I think a lot of people know there's a lot of overlap with the goth
Yeah.
community and the dominatrix community. So I talked to them, and they talked to one of their pro dom friends and was like, "You should go onto FetLife, look for some dungeons to apprentice at." So I was like,
Ah. Mm.
"Yeah."
How
And so
is
this was what was that?
Oh, I was gonna ask, like, how is your search for finding somewhere to apprentice at? And is that still the case now, or do people tend to be more independent these days, or has that changed at all?
So I think that was the case back then, and it was just kind of starting to phase out. I want to say 2010 onwards is when it kind of started phasing out.
Mm.
Um, but that was the case back then when I started, typically, is you found the dungeon that you wanted to work at. And so I want to say like at the time in LA, there must have been like 10 dungeons or so.
Well, it is
And
LA. I was about to say that's a lot, but then I'm like, well, LA is kind of like if you're on one end or the other, it's like,
yeah,
do you want to drive for 2 hours to go to a
absolutely.
dungeon? Probably not. Not in LA traffic.
Yeah. And so I've always been a researcher, so I did a lot of research on it. FetLife is a great resource for that in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily for me, there was a dungeon very, very close to me. And so I did some research on the DOMs there. And a lot of the DOMs there seem to have good imagery, good branding. They seem to be fairly well known. So I
Mm-hmm.
was like, okay, I'm going to go with this one. And so I applied that day and, like, I went there, applied, got accepted, and pretty much the rest is kind of history.
Yeah. What was the application process like, if you can talk about that at all?
Oh, so I'm sure it varies from dungeon to dungeon. I have some qualms with dungeons and how pro-doming typically works because I think
Mm.
with any kind of like gray area, legal gray area industry, specifically sex work, but
Mm-hmm.
also like with any other gray area industries, be that, I don't know, fucking drugs or something.
Yeah.
Any gray area industry, regardless, I think it should hold itself as a business and run itself as a business.
Mm, yeah.
But we all know that some entrepreneurs are better at business than others. And so the application process, I can't tell you much about it outside of like I walked into a dungeon, this dominatrix that I've been researching for a little bit. I saw her, I was like, oh, you're a lot smaller in person, which is turns out that's the thing with dominatrices. We're all a lot smaller in person. I can't even remember what kind of questions she asked me. And then something about availability. And then she gave me like a kind of like soul piercing look quietly for a minute or so. I was like, okay. And I was like, and that was pretty much the application process. I know it's a little bit different with other dungeons. Yeah, it's just yeah, it seems like there could be some things that could be refined in regards to how dungeons accept prodoms. At the same time, pro domination and also sex work is such a high turnover industry that I think it's kind of like a numbers game at a certain point.
Mm. Yeah, you
Yeah.
gotta have enough people coming in the door to replace people that are leaving it on their way out. But it sounds like you've stuck with it for a long time, so clearly something clicked for you.
So my first scene was a gangbang, and it was with dildos that were quite large, and it ended up being quite messy.
Mm.
I talked about this on Anthony Padilla's thing, but yeah, it ended up being quite messy with poop everywhere because it was my first time really using a strap on. I didn't realize
Mm.
what was happening. The dildo was large and it kind of just plunged shit out of his ass. And I was like, in all my kind of adrenaline out glory, like by the time, like I looked down and I'm like, oh no, what has happened? And then these two other mistresses are looking at me aghast because the
Mm.
scene is filthy. And I go take a shower and I'm disgusting as of that point, and I can just hear them muttering in the background like she's not coming back. And
Oh.
I was like, but I will though. It's just a little bit of poop.
Mm-hmm.
And my particular experience at that house was a little difficult. I think a lot of people could say this about houses of domination. They can be pretty difficult places to work at.
Mm.
Um, but part of it also, I mean, I'm a stubborn fuck. Like, if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to do it even more.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of used that whole experience as a boot camp to propel myself in the business. And it kind of like steeled my resolve a little bit.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, because then you can know, okay, if I can handle this, like, a normal scene's gonna be perfectly fine. So, okay. And especially when they were like, I don't think she's gonna come back. I know for me, that would also be like, all right, then. I guess I'm gonna come back every day now.
Yeah. And
So,
that's exactly what I did. I came back every single day, every
mm-hmm.
single shift available. I did that for a year and a half. Yeah.
Mm. Do you generally get to pick your clients when you work in a house of domination, or is it kind of like who's on staff today, and then the client gets to pick which person they work with?
I don't know how it's run at other houses, but as a general whole, from what I understand, you don't get any choice in the matter at all. Which is why, like, a lot of people don't like, part of the reason why a lot of people don't want to stay at houses for very long
Mm.
because, there is less specification into like your own personal interests.
Mm.
Maybe how you vet one person is not necessarily how another person would vet another.
Yeah.
For me, like, I have retained exactly, and I know this is different for everyone, but this is for me personally. I have retained exactly one client from all those years.
Wow.
And so, given it's been a long time since I worked at a house, so people fade in, fade out. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I would say the process of vetting is a little bit different, especially because they're just trying to get people in and out real fast. And
Yeah.
also, typically, the type of people who go to houses who want to like pick the flavor of the day, they're less likely to be as discerning as someone who wants to go to an independent provider.
Ah, I see. So how did you transition to becoming more of an independent provider?
Well, I got fired. I got fired, but I was planning on leaving within
Mm.
that year anyway. And then from there on forth, a whole bunch of people got fired at once.
Mm.
And so a couple of us just kind of held like trauma bonded and held each other together. And we, yeah, I the first year of coming out of independence was kind of hard for me because, you're having someone else do all your advertising, you're having
Mm.
someone else do a lot of your client outreach, and so it was rather difficult for me. But yeah, I don't know. You kind of just learn about business, and it's run in the same way as any business, really. And you
Mm.
kind of apply those same kind of same, what's the word I'm looking for? Same methodologies to
Yeah.
advertising and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
Everyone needs to have SEO, whether you're a pro
Yeah.
dom or like a candle business. It's all the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what did you like best when you started working independent and you had more of an ability to explore on your own and like develop more of your own dominant style versus just being the flavor of the week, so to speak, at the house?
Yeah, so yeah, it is really great to be able to delve into your specialties. I find that a lot of pro doms at a certain point start to develop specialties at some point, and in doing so, you get to choose to do the kinds of sessions that you really love to do.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, the types of sessions that I really love doing are bondage, um, CBT and ball busting,
Mm.
and toilet play are like my three most popular ones by far. And I love doing them. Like when I hear that I have a 3 hour ball busting session, I'm just like amped, versus, if I
Mm.
have I don't know, like a 3 hour ABDL session. ABDL is not my thing. I would be a
Mm.
little less amped. Being able to choose what you want to do is pretty awesome. And knowing that people are coming to you specifically because they know you're good at it,
Mm.
that's a good feeling. And then also, when you're working in a house, there is a lot of downtime. I guess depending financially in which era you are. Like I heard everyone I've talked to pre 2008 recession was like, working at a house, you can make six figures easily and just like go in and out and in and out, and money was everywhere. I came in after 2008, so
Mm.
that was not the case for me. There were a lot of times where it was dead all week, so you'd be sitting shift for hours and just not doing anything. um, I do miss the camaraderie of working in a house in the same way that I guess it's like similar issues with working from home versus working from an office,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, so there's those kinds of logistical issues. But also, I think if you are able to manage your business well, the opportunities for making money as an independent provider far, far outweigh what you could ever make in a house. It's just not possible because when I was in the house, I believe they took a 60% cut,
Mm.
which is, not insignificant.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, sometimes more than a 60% cut. So, and you don't really have, yeah, you just don't really have a say in how you're advertised. For someone who's a control freak, I think most pro doms are, it's not really the ideal situation.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that because you're used to like, no, this is how I want things, and don't advertise me like that. And I really deserve a 55% cut, not a 60% cut. And there's
Yeah.
not that, room for negotiation. Imagine, at least going off of what you said from the interview process. There's not like all right, here's your base pay and here's your benefits. Like, there's not that same kind of thing you would get with an employer with like a traditional like contract negotiation.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, the plus side is that if you choose where you train well, then you get to learn a lot of things really quickly from seasoned professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I did.
Mm.
The dungeon that I worked at, um, one of the headmistresses, she had a whole catalog of study items, and I'm a nerd, so I was like, yeah, let's bang through all of this. And she was like, once you get through all of this, you'll get a pay raise. So I was like, yeah, let's bang through every single class you got, every single book you got, every single movie you have. I'm just gonna do all of it. So I did all of it in kind of record time and was like, what else? What else can I learn? And then I learned how to like, shoot stuff on video and you know, learned more about lifestyle stuff. So it was good training in that regard because I think a lot of prodoms are, and I'm just going to characterize prodoms as a general whole. A lot of us are loners and like very introverted people.
Mm.
Some of us aren't, and those people I would say are uncommon, as is like the straight sex worker is uncommon. Like the social dominatrix is like a little harder to find, I think. But yeah, it's kind of a nice experience to have all these people in the room. It can also sometimes be a terrible experience, so it's really what you make of it.
Yeah, it sort of depends on more what you're looking for. So I'm curious, when you got into doing more independent work, what were some of your first clients like, if you can talk about that?
Ooh. This is interesting because like I was going through a lot of personal stuff when I first became independent. And I think a
Mm.
lot of that affected my play style and how I could connect with clients. And part of me coming from the dungeon where there was like a specific style of not necessarily high protocol, but very like classic slavery. I would say like
Mm.
East Coast, almost German style slavery, where it was like very cold and like, okay, slave. And like coming from that and then going independent and realizing that my client retention wasn't where it should have been, and just trying to figure out like, what is it about how I'm connecting with people? Why am I having trouble getting regulars? Stuff like that. I I had an interesting time kind of figuring out who I was within scene because you want it to be authentic, right? You
Yeah.
don't I think as stupid as men can be when they have boners sometimes, just like brain melting out their ears, I think a lot of people can oftentimes, at least in person, tell if an interaction feels authentic.
Mm.
So I was struggling to kind of figure out how to make that feel authentic as someone who doesn't connect with strangers very well. For me, part of that meant just like trying to figure out my interests. And going into it, I knew what like my primary interest was. It was sadism.
Mm.
Like I identify as a sadist first and foremost above everything else. But um, yeah, my clients were kind of all over the map when I first went independent, and I think this is the case with a lot of younger pro doms is before you really develop a voice, you get clients all over the board. There's like a phrase for it. I'm forgetting, but it's kind of like there's a specific kind of client who very much likes to talk from the bottom and like
Ah.
has all these like very specific ideas within the scene. Like, you need to be wearing a pink top and like white nylon pants, and you need to like call yourself princess, and you need to, and then we're gonna feed me popcorn in this way, kernel by kernel, just like very specific things. And I
Mm.
think you get a lot of those like very, very specific clients when you're starting off because I think a lot of more established pronoms just like don't want to deal with it,
Yeah.
and so by proxy, you get a lot of novices. And I think a lot of novice pronoms also we end up doing a lot of sensual stuff, um, with good reason. I think the heavier play. A lot of clients would be hesitant to approach someone with just like 2 years under their belt for super heavy stuff.
Mm.
So yeah, I would get a lot of stuff like ass worship and like super specific role plays and Asian domination, like Asian race play sort of stuff.
Ah.
And yeah, it was like kind of the soft stuff, which I knew I didn't really want to do. So in the years following, I worked really hard on my branding to go more towards the sadism stuff. And along the way, I also realized I really like bondage, and started putting bondage into it. And yeah, so the clients that I have now are very different than the clients I had when I
Mm.
started.
And
Yeah.
so now you have a little bit more of like a consistent, repeat customers because you've developed that style as opposed to, so when you're first starting out and you're trying to develop your client base, there's a lot of flow with that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think also, I think a lot of pro doms learn this when they're sessioning is that a lot of us tend to blow our load too quickly in the scene, you know? Even in like an hour long scene. I remember when I first started, I was like, how am I supposed to like, I've done all these things in 15 minutes and what else am I gonna do, you know? And a lot of it was a lot of the learning that I've done through the years is kind of learning how to this sounds kind of woo, but it's the only way that I can describe it. Is like you kind of just work with the energy of the scene. If something feels
Yeah.
good, you can keep playing with that. You don't need to cram like a million different things into one scene just because they ask for it. Like just because they ask for it doesn't mean it's gonna be great. So kind of learning how to not blow my load too quickly in scene and like step back and be present with the sub. Um,
Mm.
I think when I was starting out, I was more fixated on perhaps the actions than the actual interaction. Um, and as I've gotten better at it and learned to be more present and grounded and like uh, stuff like that, I feel like been able to develop better connections with people. And they still take clients that don't fit outside of my usual scene because sometimes recently I was like, did like a 2 hour, like 3 hour foot worship scene, and I was like, oh, that was pretty nice. I didn't have to clean anything. We just sat here and got my legs massaged for hours. Whereas when I started, I was like, I hate foot worship. It's like way too intimate for me. Now I'm like,
Mm. Yeah.
this is fine, and I could like crack jokes and like fuck around on my phone, and it was nice, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So even still, I'm still kind of reevaluate. You constantly need to reevaluate what you're into because things change, you know?
Yeah, and that's so true. Not even just with being a pro dom, but with lifestyle BDSM as well. Like both things, where one, don't blow your load too early in the scene. Like you don't have to do everything all at once. If you've negotiated a scene where you're gonna do, caning and foot worship and heavy bondage, you don't have to do all of that in the first 15 minutes. You can definitely space it out, and then also, with reevaluating your style and what you want over time, and allowing your own internal process to be what it is and not just forcing yourself to stay in a box. And I find a lot of people that get into the scene and they start as a dom or as a sadist or something, they can oftentimes end up like boxing themselves in to be like, I'm a dom that does this, or I'm a sadist that does that. And even sometimes it's not even them, it's like the community they're a part of expects something from them, and they're like, oh my god, I somehow accidentally got a reputation as like the guy that only does food play, and like what do I what do I do now? Like I want to do other stuff, but I only ever get approached to do this one thing, and it can be really hard to escape that if you're not like actively trying to maybe not reinvent yourself, but add new things in.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just, I can't, well, it's not that I ever get bored with sadism. I don't because sadism is like my core, but we're nuanced people. And sometimes, especially if you're a professional and you do this all the time, you can get stuck in a rut very easily.
Mm.
And so it's just nice to have someone or something break you outside of it, which is also why I like doubles and going to parties and stuff. It's because, you get to see how other people do it. And then sometimes like a light turns on in your head and you're like, oh, I could have done it this way. It seems so logical that they did it this way, but it just never connected in my brain that I could do something this way,
Mm-hmm.
and enjoy it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's just like to mix up energies.
Yeah. So when you say go to parties, I'm curious because do you mean like going to BDSM dungeon parties, or do you mean like going to other formal events for stuff? Because there's a gaming, it's called Child's Play. They do a charity dinner around here in Seattle. I don't live in Seattle
Mhm.
anymore. Actually, I live in Portland, but the place I used to live until very recently, there was a charity dinner they had, and I've 100% seen a pro dom at that event at the charity dinner with the submissive before. It was very subtle. Like if you didn't know them, you would know like what was
Yeah.
going on, but it was definitely like very small man following around this like Amazonly like Amazonian esque woman wearing like high heels and like a fur stole and like a very luxurious blue dress and everything. But anyways, What do you mean by going to parties as a dom? Is it more like dungeons or is it like outside stuff?
I would say it's both, although realistically, I haven't done outside stuff in a while because
Mm-hmm.
I am pretty reclusive. Yeah, I would say it's both. I like things where I get paid because who doesn't?
Mm-hmm.
But regardless of that, yeah, I try to make it to a couple parties a year. I haven't been to a lifestyle one since the pandemic, really, but I try to do it. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't go to what's it called? Torture Garden this year because I was kind of sick, but yeah, it's just nice to go out and see how other people do things.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's frustrating to go out and see how other people do things. Sometimes it's great.
Mm-hmm. Like in a oh darn I wish I could do that kind of a way, or like seeing people and you're like, why are you doing that like that? Stop it.
Oh, it's the latter for me because I'm like I'm just so nitpicky about stuff. Like, oh, yeah, I could go on about that and male doms in particular, but I'm not gonna
Oh
get
yeah.
into it.
No, that is I totally everyone I swear to God, I go to dungeons all the time, but I'm like, you say you're like a Shibari master and then like the way you do rope is just terrifyingly bad, like in a
Yeah.
dangerous way. I totally get that and I feel like there's this weird thing with male doms in particular where there's sort of this like you mentioned that a lot of doms are kind of more loners. They have definitely a very like lone wolf mentality of like I'm a dom, I don't need to learn from anyone else. If I'm a dom, I should just already know how to do it somehow for some reason because that's how building skills works. And
Yeah.
it has bad results from time to time.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of my issue with a lot of male doms is that they have never needed to question that they're dominant, you know? They
Mm.
just assume that they are, that it's like the baseline. And I'm like, having been with like a lot of people who thought they were dominant, like oftentimes what that meant was like unconsensual choking in bed, slapping my face unconsensual, a lot of unconsensual stuff because they're like, I'm dominant and therefore I should do this. And I'm like, maybe you should figure out like the tenets of BDSM first before making assumptions on what dominance means because dominance could just mean like telling me you love me, you know? Like
Mm-hmm.
it could be like hugging me and telling me you love me or it could be so it was I think yeah, that's a lot of my frustration with it. And I hear this from a lot of my friends who are submissive femmes looking for like male doms, where they're
Mm-hmm.
like, all of them just are kind of shitty because they don't have any skills and they don't really know how to negotiate any kind of consent. Yeah, so I think it's just like it's just shitty that one can just assume that they're dominant and therefore like that makes them super valid within a scene. Like maybe that's not the best way of phrasing it. Everyone is valid within a scene, but like just because you assume that you're dominant doesn't necessarily mean you know how to play safely.
Like there was an article I was reading the other day where somebody that like they do like spanking therapy and they call themselves a doctor even though they're like not a medical professional. Like, oh yeah, I've just been doing this for so long. I'm basically like a doctor, and I'm like, I don't think that's how getting a medical degree works, but okay. So yeah, there's definitely that sense of like because I'm a dom, now suddenly everything I do and say is gold, and it's like no, it is actually a skill you have to cultivate. And there is definitely, I will say though, on male doms, on their side, there are a lot of male doms, at least that watch my channel and consume my content, where they're like, I really want to learn from another male dom, but they're just like outside of like maybe going to a convention or paying for a class, like they're not available. Like you can't like they don't do stuff like this. They don't really. It's been really hard to find any male doms to do interviews with. They don't have YouTube channels. They're not really on social media to educate people for the most part. They're kind of I have my harem of four submissives and that's my life, and like not really interested in like I don't know telling the world their secrets of success. I guess I don't know what it is, but they're just
Yeah.
not as into the education part of things for some reason on both sides of the equation.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. I wonder why that is. Like it shit. I feel like, well, on the other hand, like I feel like, the gay male community has a lot of education.
Yeah.
So then you just have to like switch over to that. Although personally, I think domination is like you can learn from whatever gender, sexuality,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. It's all kind of the same. Everything else is just like your own specific stylistic twist on it.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are a lot of things that I can learn as a femdom, but like, you could still apply that to a male easily.
Mm-hmm.
Certain things like other specific gendered things are like, look at this angle that like my butt is at, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like body specific, but outside of that, I think all the general applications are the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think, as there is more online education and more online access, I think people are becoming more open to learning from a variety of people, regardless of gender or sexual orientation. But there is still sort of that, like, I don't know, almost, it definitely is a little bit of like sexism or like homophobia in it a little bit, where it's like, why would I learn from a woman? Or like, why would I, like, they feel uncomfortable almost in a strange way sometimes, like, learning from somebody who's like outside of their particular demographic. But I'm trying to break down those walls of like, no, it doesn't demasculinize you to learn from a pro dom that's been doing this for 20 years. Like, that's
Yeah.
how, in the lifestyle community, at least, that's where a lot of our original education came from. That's, I try to remind people of that, is like, originally all this happened because it was the pro doms and also the gay leather community that came together with us, like, the, I'm saying us, but like the more general, like, heterosexual non-professional community, all came together and fused our ideas into sort of what ended up becoming things like the Jugendspiegel Society, or Society of I always say it wrong, Janus.
I don't
I sh-
know.
yeah,
I feel like it's Janice. I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah, it's Janus, whatever it is, I'll put it on the screen so it doesn't matter. But like, that all came together and made the community what it is now. And so it's like, all of the skills. I promise you that, like, this wasn't all invented by one person one day who passed down the 10 commandments of BDSM. Like, it's always a very individual process of people coming together and sharing what they know and learning from others, and giving back. So,
Yeah, definitely. And it's like if you want to learn the more gendered things, it's like as a top, the things we're learning are more about how to do stuff to other people than like
mm-hmm.
necessarily who we are. It's like you can dress however the fuck you want. You can talk however the fuck you want. Anything you do, like in some way, as long as you're following some kind of consent.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you do, you'll find a person for it. But
Mm-hmm.
it's more like as a top, we're always doing stuff to other people. So really, if you want to learn about like dominating women or something, you could watch a class about dominating women taught by a woman, or
Mm-hmm.
by a man or by whoever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I don't know, what comes to my mind is like if you're focusing more on yourself, like that's kind of like pickup artisty stuff to me
Oh,
because
yeah.
as a top, we're just it's a lot of work. You're topping other people. It's not like, and I'm this perfect creature and everything comes to me and everybody will do as I say. It's like, no, you're learning how to torture a penis or like play with a vulva or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the topics you should be delving for, and not necessarily the teacher. Like the teacher should be not accredited, but like well regarded.
Mm-hmm.
But like I would just focus on their interests. Like in the same way
Yeah.
that if I do learn bondage, I don't really care who I'm learning it from as long as they're good at bondage.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, and definitely the vetting process is so important, not even just for clients or for partners, but also for the people you learn from. Because if, again, you can have people that sort of just say they know what they're talking about, and but then if you looked at reviews or talked to the people who took classes from them, you'd be like, oh, actually, they don't really know what they're saying. They're looking for a quick, $40 a ticket or whatever it is to take a class from them, and they, they just read a book once and they're just repeating what's in the book or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, going back more into your work as a professional dominant or dominatrix, how did you stumble upon the name Daddy on Lee, actually? Because I love it when people use the term daddy regardless of gender. So, I'm curious how you kind of fell on that one in particular.
So I in high school, I kept on trying to make people call me daddy. It didn't work very well, but I went through, I mean, like sex was one of my special interests in high school, and I went through a phase where I was like very, very interested in gay leather culture in high school. And
Mm.
so I really wanted people to call me daddy and put it on my Facebook name and everything. Like I want to say I was like 15 and I like, changed my Facebook name and all this stuff. And it's still there. It's still there. Um, so I always wanted to call myself daddy. And so when I started, Okay, so when I started, where On Lee comes from is the dungeon. At the time that I started, things were a little bit more racist then, just like full on. And when you go into a dungeon, you know, at the time they were like, a lot of people are going to want to see you because you're Asian and therefore you need an Asian sounding name. And so I was like,
Huh.
well, I really just want a name like Pussy Galore or something, like I wanted like a super like porny James Bondy name. But they were like, no, absolutely not. And still to this day, I would have been happy with a name like that, honestly. They were like, you're gonna regret that. And I was like, I'm really not going to. But they were like, okay, you have to choose an Asian sounding name, Chinese, and it has to be something that one, that they can remember, two, that they can pronounce, three, that nobody else has, and four, that isn't a car, flower, jewel, metal, and I think city, something like that. So like nothing like Mercedes or Diamond or
Mm.
something like that. So like no stripper names, pretty much.
Mm.
And so I that only leaves you with a couple of names. I created a list of like over 200 names, and they like struck out every single one, and it left me with two. And the thing that really got me was like something that people can pronounce. And in Chinese, you have a lot of like multiple vowels, like three vowels in a row, a lot of X's, like, like it's, nobody's pronouncing it. So it left me with two names. And out of those two, they were like, this one. And I was like, okay, so I have that. So at the time, I was going by dominatrix only or mistress only. I still go by dominatrix only, but that's more of an SEO thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, mistress, it felt okay. It felt okay. Goddess didn't really feel right. Princess absolutely did not feel right. Um, Domina, I would have gone with Domina, except half a year into me doming, I realized there was a Domina I Lee in the Bay
Oh.
Area. And I was like buying my website and I stumble across hers as I'm like typing that in, just making sure that no one has it. And I was like, guess I'm not going by Domina. And yeah, so I went by mistress for the first couple of years, and then finally I was like, "Fuck it, it's daddy." I just like no, I identify more as genderqueer, and like I'm like kind of more mask androgynous in my personal life.
Mm.
So for me, it was like I can do the high femme everything. Obviously, I have the hair, etc. But I was just kind of tired of people calling me by super femme names.
Mm. Yeah.
So I want to say the daddy change came about 4, maybe 5 years ago. And then when I changed it, I was like, yeah, that feels right. That
Mm-hmm. Your
feels a little
15-year-old self knew.
yeah, 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 definitely.
Yeah, that's awesome. I don't think I've ever heard anyone that like knew when they were 15 they wanted to be a daddy and they then somehow it popped up like years later as like being their dominant, but I love it. That's such a great story.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because there's like a lot of things about my weird interests as a kid that I was like, oh, it all makes sense now, like seeing Goatsy and just like going back and like looking at Goatsy again and again and again and again and being like, what is happening here? And then being the person who does that.
Mhm. Yeah, it's it's as much as people kind of get I think like squicked out talking about like kids and sexuality and stuff like things that we're exposed to early on are very formative for what we end up wanting as adults or what we gravitate towards, right? It's like where a lot of people's interest in like stockings and high heels comes from is like watching mom get changed in the morning every day and then suddenly developing a weird like mental connection with that. So it definitely
Yeah.
happens on both sides of the slash.
Yeah. And it's like, on the one hand, I don't condone selling sexuality to kids, like,
Yeah.
absolutely not. On the other hand, people sexualize everything. Like, I sexualized a lot of things in my pubescent years, and it was stuff that wasn't meant to be horny. But there it was. But
Mm-hmm.
then there was that kink. So it's kind of inevitable. I think, especially with kinky people too, where we just kind of I remember one of the women who trained me, she was like, she suspected that there was something different with kinky people because like why do some people traumatize or sexualize their traumas? and other
Mm.
people don't, like what is it about a kinky person that does that? So I don't know.
Well, if you are curious to answer that question, you like reading books, which it sounds like you do. There's a book, I can send you a link to it if you want. It's
Oh yeah.
called I think it's The Erotic Mind by Jack Moran. And he's like I think he's a sexologist. It's been a while since I've read it, but I think he's a sexologist and he actually did some research into understanding people's sexual fantasies and where they come from. And he talks a lot about like how our brains tend to eroticize difficult to process emotions and feelings, which is why like early on when your full spectrum of emotions a little bit more limited, sometimes what can end up happening is you start kind of developing those early associations and eroticizing something that's really hard to process. This is like especially true for people that like end up having humiliation kinks or certain other fetishes where like maybe they were bullied in school and then that ends up kind of transfiguring into this kink that ends up following them through their lives instead of it just being like a trauma thing. It end up like being processed through their
Hmm.
sexuality.
Oh, interesting. Cool.
Yeah, so I think as well. So let's kind of get more into talking about like your particular kinks, I guess, and like what you're known for as a dominatrix. Because there's a lot of stuff that was on your website, like as far as like CBT and medical play, and like how you sort of developed a reputation for doing that. Was that something you did when you were still working at a house, and you kind of just carried it through as you were doing more independent work, or was that something you had to kind of pick up and learn once you started becoming independent and you were like, oh, this is totally the thing I want to do for all my sessions?
So a lot of that stuff was stuff that I did learn at the house and then kind of carried on through. Um, I was lucky that the one of the people who mentored me, she was very well known for CBT, and
Mm.
so I learned a lot of stuff through her. Yeah, and I was able to hop in on some of those sessions. The nice thing about being at a house is being able to sit in on other people's sessions. So I got to
Mm.
sit in on medical sessions. I got to sit in on the CBT sessions. I got to sit in on a lot of things. And so you had a lot of bodies to learn on, like how to sound or like how to do an enema, stuff like that, that I would be very hesitant to learn on my own. And I'd also be a little bit more hesitant to teach to other people. Enemas
Yeah.
are fine. Everyone should learn how to do an enema, really. Being around someone who was pretty well known as a heavy sadist meant that like I could practice on her slaves and things like that. So I learned how to do needles, all these sorts of things. And I also spent a decent amount of time researching things on my own as
Mm-hmm.
well. I do have a medical fetish, so it's easy for me to research that because I would have researched it anyway. And so I did a lot of research with stuff like needle play and like catheterization. Um, with the heavier CBT stuff, there is only so much your research can take you with that because nobody is doing like studies about how many kicks in the balls you could take before
Yeah.
you run through the balls.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, with the heavy CBT stuff, I classify myself as rack. So, you know, the people who are coming in to see me, I vet them pretty heavily. And that's also with the understanding that like although you and I would both not like anything to happen in session, we both understand that this is a heavy session. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you're asking to have your genitals nailed to a board, that's a heavy session. And so the people who come in for that with me, if they don't understand it, we do have a pretty lengthy discussion about it. So for example, a lot of ball busting guys are all like, I want to have children. Can I do ball busting? And I'm like, ball busting, well, if you're doing it a lot, it's going to decrease your sperm count. I see it like
Mm-hmm.
all across the board. So, we can do stuff that kind of simulates that pain, but like you're probably not going to get 50 full force kicks to the nads like you want. Sorry. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you really want children. But if you're kind of 50-50 on children, this will be a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the activities that I do definitely do come with a hint of caution in them.
Mm.
And if someone seems like they don't really get it or maybe are not in the soundest mind to be able to make those decisions, then I just don't see them because pretty, I like good thing, bad thing, pretty early on in my career, I've had interactions with clients who were definitely not sound of mind. And afterwards, I did not feel good about the session because I was like, they were on a lot of drugs, and or this was person on a manic break, and or this was a person who was schizophrenic off their meds. Like,
Mm.
do I feel okay about what happened in the scene after all of that? No, I don't. So for my own mental well-being, I don't really see people like that. But yeah, I mean, there's like a lot of the types of play that we do, or you can do your research on it, and I've learned from a lot of other people as well. And I still try, in the years that I'm available, I try to go to conventions and take classes from other people, and then you'll find out that what you learned from one person wasn't true, and maybe that person is right, and maybe this person's wrong, and you kind of have to keep on reevaluating the information you're given with,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of play to the best of your ability. So yeah, it's been an ongoing learning. But yeah, I did learn a lot of that stuff in the dungeon, so I was pretty
Mm-hmm.
lucky to be able to do that.
Yeah. So one, I have to make this comment. So it sounds like what you're saying is that CBT might actually be a good form of potential male birth control. Um, and then
Sure.
and then also at the same time, like how can you tell a difference between a client or someone that is approaching you and they're just like talking a big talk and they're kind of just fantasy spewing at you versus somebody who does really want a heavier level of play? Because I'm not a pro dom, and I even get emails from random internet men that are like, dear mistress, please, and then just like 10 paragraphs of like the most insane fantasy you've ever heard. And then it's
Yeah.
like, I don't know what you want me to do with this information, dude. But yeah,
Yeah.
how do you tell the difference between like actual people who want to be clients and just like extreme fantasy time wasters?
So I think the first thing would be like, how erratic are they? If they're pretty
Mm.
erratic, probably a time waster. I have a lot of a lot of barriers set in place for how people can contact me. So, for example, you have to fill out my contact form, and I'm sure you saw the contact form
Mm-hmm.
on my website. It's pretty elaborate. Um, just taking a look at how someone fills out the form, like, is it too long? Is it too short? Have they like clearly missed instructions for doing A, B, and C? Are they like not putting that effort into there? Uh, um, there's you can kind of like, based on that form, for me, I can quickly be able to tell if someone's wasting my time. Also, I find that people who tend to write entire novellas to you, that is their jerk off process, and
Mm.
I'm just not going to read it, unless it says something that is like particularly entertaining to me. Yeah, I'm just not going to read it because I know that they've got one hand on their
Mm-hmm.
crotch the entire time they're typing. Uh, yeah, and so for me personally, I found that people who are truly serious about their heavier interests, they tend to want to research the DOMs that they see pretty heavily because they understand
Mm.
that it is a heavy interest that comes with a lot of risks. They read through my website, they take a look at everything. They mention things that I've posted in other places, because they've done their research. Like,
Ah, yeah.
my website is meant as a resource so that if you have a lot of questions, you can answer it. Like, I have an answer for you. I pretty much am guaranteed. I just spend hours tweaking my website because it's also, I don't want to talk to people that much when I'm not getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
So my website has the answer, and if you don't know the answer to it based on my website, then you probably weren't ready for this super heavy session. Like, do you really want your like your scrotum inflated with saline, if you're not going to read through all the stuff on my website?
Mm.
Are you going to do it from some random person that you've like seen one picture off of, or are you going to find someone who seems to be a provider who will like create a somewhat sterile scene, and like be able to take care of you in case anything goes wrong? Hopefully it doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
like, God forbid it does. But I find that people, yeah, who are generally interested in heavier play will want to do the research and will be pretty respectful of my time. And oftentimes, the people who want the really heavy scenes, I find, for my personal like preference and like people that I've enjoyed the most, they'll ask for a scene, and it won't be the heavy scene yet. They're just kind
Uh,
of doing the scene just to see if it vibes well. And then if it vibes well, then they're like, by the way, I also want to have my dick nailed to a board. And I'm like, cool, okay, yeah, now that we've played and I see that like you're serious and you've been respectful, yeah, we can do the second date activity.
mm-hmm.
Um, but some things aren't first date activities either.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, with like, yeah, heavier scenes, just if you really care about your body, you're going to care about who you are hiring to do those things to your body.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think especially if you're a beginner that's probably been fantasizing about maybe one really intense thing for a long time, you might want to get to that really quickly, but you are not mentally or educationally prepared for all of the ramifications that potentially has outside of the mental fantasy you've created for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about things, and sometimes just like physically their body, like physiologically, their body just doesn't interact in the same way that they expect it to interact. Like,
Hmm.
for example, like strap on, some
Oh, yeah.
people some people can handle it really well and they're great from the get-go, but other people, it might take them years before they feel really comfortable with having something slide in and out because it's just such an intense sensation that is not always inherently pleasurable, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, like mind and body are two different things
Mm-hmm.
sometimes.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that, like, when you're getting into play, and I'm sure I have people listening to this right now that are, like, newer male submissives or just people in general that would want to see a pro dom, like, definitely, you can talk about what your ideals are, but you might have to lower your expectations for what your body can actually handle, because most people don't get into BDSM being able to do an hour long whipping scene or being able to take 200 needles or any of a number of other things, or you got to work your way up there. Your body has not caught up with your fantasy yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm. So I know we don't have a ton more time left, so let me think about what I want to do for my last question or two.
Let me get back to it. You asked about if dungeons were still the way for prodoms to learn.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I don't think I really got into that, but I would say that a lot of people, sorry, I'm like looking at hair on the bed. I think now dungeons aren't really the way for people to learn.
Mm-hmm.
There, there's a lot of, I don't really like the phrase insta-dom because that can kind of be pejorative sometimes.
Mm.
There are good doms who come from kind of like an insta-dom background. But a lot of people I personally separate it into fin-dom and pro-dom, and that's how I work it out in my head. Because
Yeah.
like a lot of people come from like a fin-dom background, and coming from that, you have the like fin doming is tends to be a little bit more financially lucrative than pro doming. It just is.
Mm-hmm.
Not, I mean, obviously not for everyone. It is work regardless. But yeah, the note I wanted to add in is that like a lot of people now come in from a fin dom background and then
Mm-hmm.
start doing pro doming stuff, which is I think okay. I don't really feel positively or negatively about it. It just is in the way that houses of domination don't make that much money now to begin with, and if you're coming
Mm.
in as a sex worker and you need to make money, then yeah, come in as a fin dom, and if you want to do all the heavier things, then learn from other people, and that's pretty much what I wanted to say from that.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree with that. I get a lot of people that leave comments, like whenever I even mention Findom in like a video or something, they're like, oh my God, that's horrible. It's so unethical. Like everyone who does it is fake and yada yada. And I think there's problems with it when you're kind of, because I think some people, it reminds me of like sometimes the way people treat like sugar babying, where they're like, oh, I'm not really a sex worker. I just do this. And it's like,
Mhm.
uh, are you sure? Like,
Yeah.
okay. And there can kind of be this like looking down on like either BDSM in general or other types of pro dom stuff, and I don't like that when people get kind of like high and mighty about like I do this and it's better than other people who do this, and it's like no, you're all kind of. I don't really think that's how the world sees you.
Yeah.
I don't like it when people put down others to put themselves up. But it's definitely, I think, the way that a lot of people are getting into professional domination work now in general is like they find something about Findom online and they're like, oh, that sounds cool. And then they try it and then they get kind of more into other types of BDSM, or they have clients that want certain other things that aren't just Findom, or just the overall networking of like being on Twitter, Instagram, or something. You're going to see more examples of stuff besides just nothing but Findom eventually.
Yeah, and I think, on the one hand, the problematic thing about fin doming is that once you start doing the more conventional BDSM activities, then perhaps you should start seeking out training and perhaps some findoms don't realize that initially, because they
Yeah.
come in from the findom side. And also, like findoming being largely virtual, it doesn't really have the business of findoming itself does not run itself the same way that BDSM does, where it's like
Mm.
there's aftercare, you actually get to know the person and really like have an ongoing relationship with them. So how you interact with a findom client versus how you interact with someone in scene are two very different things.
Mhm.
Sometimes they overlap, but even like my real time findom clients, we still have like aftercare type things. It's
Mhm.
always like, oh, how are you doing? Like, let's talk about this. Whereas with findom clients, oftentimes the interaction is in and out really fast.
Mhm.
No introduction, no warm up, just get them in and out, which is fine. But it's just like why I classify findom as something a little bit different than actual pro doming. Yeah, I don't know. It's like I think the benefit of it is that if you can, like, a lot of sex workers need money, right?
Yeah.
So whatever it is that you need to do to make money is great. As a realistic whole, if you want to come into domination somehow and you want to be able to support your lifestyle, I would say working in a dungeon is not the way for you to do it. Very
Mhm.
few people are going to come out of that super successful. It just is what it is. You will have a way better chance, like making money on the online domination sort of things. And if you need a way to support your income, then yeah, support it with online doming and like be able to pay for lessons or like take classes or like go to community events and stuff and um, learn how to do actual like BDSM scenes before
Mhm.
necessarily taking that on. Although I guess like stuff with foot worship, you're fine, foot
Yeah,
worship.
there's a
Foot
level
worship.
where it's like if you're doing like a tickling scene or like and it's not too intense because tickle torture can get really intense,
Yeah.
or you're doing something like foot worship, like okay, yeah, you can probably like intuit your way through that a little bit more easily than like somebody who wants to be tied upside down and then like whipped until their back turns like red and purple. That's
Yeah.
different levels of skill set there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to watch how things have been changing within the FinDom versus the ProDom field.
Mm.
And I kind of I always watch it with some amount of interest because I came in right around the cusp that things were really changing.
Yeah.
And I find that as a general whole, the ProDoms I know that have done better for themselves are people who have gone into like the online FinJob sort of thing as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just, real time work, it can be hard. And if we're going into a recession, supposedly, then it's
Mm-hmm.
going to get harder. I know loads of really, really, really good pro doms with like over a decade under their belt who, still struggle to pay the bills sometimes because it's just a different sort of business. It's
Mm-hmm.
not as necessarily lucrative as findoming sometimes. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just an interesting thing to kind of witness for me personally.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's either they have always been very separate or they're becoming very separate, where it's like there's more general pro doming work and then there's findom and maybe do the people who do like are there a lot of people who do both or is it kind of you do one or you do the other?
I think there are a decent amount of people. So what I actually think is like they started off a lot more separate initially, and now there's a little bit more overlap.
Okay.
Um, and I think part of that is also like Twitter and social media because we all interact on Twitter. And so they see someone doing one thing and you see one person doing like maybe a pro dom sees a fin dom doing this thing and then they see how successful that is. So they take that tactic. Or like the fin dom sees the pro dom doing this thing and they see like, they pull that for their marketing. And so it seems like it's converging more now.
Mm.
There seems to be a little like a couple years ago, there was a lot of vitriol in the pro dom community for findoms.
Yeah.
Um, I would say there still is sometimes, but it's mostly for a lack of training.
Mhm.
Um, but at the same time, a lot of the houses that people trained in weren't great houses to train in. You had to hop around from house to house to find any good training. So it's like just because you started in real time doesn't necessarily mean you necessarily have like an abundance of skills that are far greater than Findom.
Mhm.
So it's yeah, there seems to be more crossover, and I hope that with more discussion, that like uh, people Findoms who do want to get more into classical kind of BDSM activities do seek out training. And, vice versa. Like
Hmm.
a lot of pro doms, we could learn from fin doms because they're great marketers. They're incredible
Oh
marketers,
yeah, yeah. Definitely, they've
So,
got the business side locked down, especially when it
absolutely.
comes to search engine stuff. And like they're all over Twitter. Like clearly, they figured out a market. And I think like you said before, inflation. There was a recession in 2008. There's probably going to be one again soon here in the U.S. Like if you're in the U.K. and you're a pro dom, you're dealing with like a huge energy crisis as well on top of all those other things. COVID for multiple years now. Like there's been a lot that's gotten in the way of more traditional pro doming work being lucrative. And if findom is like a service you add to your skill set or something, and that's a way to keep your business afloat and be able to keep doing what you love, like I don't really think there should be any shame in that. But yeah, I find the problem a lot of people have with it seems to be that they don't understand like the ethical boundaries of it. They don't understand kind of where the role play stops and starts with like, are you really draining this person's bank account to $0, or is it you just saying that because it's hot to say that, and that's where people get really concerned. It's like, oh my god, there's these 20-year-olds on the internet that instead of going to college they're becoming findoms and are making these people homeless. Like that's the fantastic image they have in their heads of like how horrible it seems to be.
Yeah. And I mean, certainly some people are doing that in the same way that like some pro doms really are cutting off men's balls. But
Mm-hmm.
I think I wonder if it like at some I doubt, well, considering that there's like only legislation against sex workers, but it would be interesting if there were some kind of move at some point where in the same way that like on YouTube and Instagram you have to
Mm-hmm.
say an ad, it would be interesting if there were some kind of push to be like, this is an advertisement. But for
Mm.
me, like, pretty much all my social media is an advertisement and take it as such.
Mm-hmm.
You just like take it as advertisement, which is generally how I view all that sort of stuff. Because, but maybe I'm just cynical and jaded about it, but social media shouldn't be your journal for your actual feelings to the world. It
Yeah.
can be it can be all sorts of things, but it should not actually be like your true outlet. And so for me, like I've had to separate myself from it and just, be like, that was clearly advertising, and I'm not gonna, unless I see an actual video of someone getting hurt, like I'm not really gonna get too fucked up by it because it's
Mm-hmm.
advertising. And, you know, I think as sex workers, sometimes we necessarily do inflate the truth a little bit because it's advertising.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's like when they make the Whopper look really pretty in like a Burger King
yeah,
commercial. It's like, it doesn't really look like that in real life. And in the same way
yeah,
that like a pro dom services the way they sell it on Twitter or Instagram or something, it's not going to be the same in real life either. And everyone kind of knows that because, like you said, it is advertising. So
yeah.
anyways, I know that we are a little bit past time now. So thank you so much for being here, Daddy on Lee. This is a wonderful conversation, and I'm so glad that we were able to make this all work out. Is there anything that you want to promote or link to or share for people that maybe want to find out more about you?
Sure. So my website is You're My Bitch, youremybit.ch. My Twitter is Shadowban to High Hell, but if you can find it, good for you. It's daddy underscore on Lee. I don't really use my Instagram, but I have a lot of impersonators out there. So if someone is messaging you saying they're me, it's not me. I
Mm-hmm.
don't do that unless you're paying me. But my Instagram is mistress underscore only and dominatrix underscore only. And yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, well, thank you so much again for being here. If I can link this stuff, I'll probably do it in a pinned comment below because YouTube is really not friendly with like anything vaguely sex or BDSM related being linked. They're like, that's pornography. And I'm like, it's literally a link to a journal, but okay, sure, YouTube. Anyways, story for a different time. Links will be down below in a pinned comment if people want to check that out. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you guys want to subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on any of his other interviews, I have so many more coming besides this one. And if you guys want to see previews of these interviews, they do go up on Patreon a couple days early for people on my Patreon. And I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day and an amazing rest of your week. Bye.
Bye.